All right, so let me get us started. So I'm Kristen Boggs, I'm the director of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship, and joined today by Catherine Jones, who I mentioned is an alumni, and she'll be sharing her perspective as both a former fellow as well as a 3-term member of our advisory council. So she'll be able to speak to what it was like to be a fellow, as well as what we're looking for in our future fellows. And Catherine's going to interject throughout today's session. You'll have to unmute though, Catherine.
Unmute. My apologies. I didn't want any feedback. So just a little bit about these. What are these things called again? I don't see the notes. So
QR code.
QR codes. Yeah, so you already know about this Learn About Becoming a Fellow, but if you haven't already, you can take your phone and take a picture of this and just indicate your interest and sign up with us. And then again, look at the other QR code here and you can see about the other fellows and what they're doing right now and how they've been impacted by COVID and how they're overcoming, just barriers and things like that. It's really nice.
Yep, so tonight we're going to try to answer your questions, hopefully ones that you've already shared with us. The ones at top of this screen, in fact, are ones that we've had people submit through our interest form. So we'll make sure we cover them tonight. But then also the ones on the bottom are kind of what I would call our frequently asked questions. So we'll make sure and touch on them as well. Feel free to stop us at any time if you have, just need us to go into more depth about something we're discussing. And then we'll obviously hold some time at the end for Q&A as well. All right, so before we dive into the fellowship projects, which I know is sort of one of the most exciting and fun parts of it, but I do want to just put into context what our overall mission is. And that is really to equip you as a student in a health profession field with skills and a commitment to work with vulnerable populations, both now and in the future. And so we do that through this 1-year fellowship project, and I'll explain in more detail about these 4 that you see pictured here. But I like to always say that we sort of have a dual mission, what I just described, but also to really try and do right by the community and make sure that we use this 1-year experience in a way that's going to benefit the community partners. So the 3 kind of components of what we're doing, what you may be most familiar with is that Mentor Direct Service project. 200 hours of service is put in over the course of a year by our fellows, and they're doing this in collaboration with a community site. Part of our role can be to help you, identify who a good partner would be, and then to sort of put the pieces into place, like what is the outcome you're going to be seeking, kind of like making sure we have a clear understanding of what the need is that you're trying to address, and then coming up with all the kind of interim steps that you'll take in order to reach that goal. But we also, do this as a group. So we're learning together. We learn not only through orientation and quarterly retreats, but also monthly meetings. I've been telling students this year during recruitment sessions that, we are sort of learning as we go because of COVID. We had to, transition what used to be all in-person meetings to all virtual. Now we're trying to kind of transition back. But what we're finding is it's some blended approach where we can learn together and kind of form connections and relationships and trust, but then also have the ability to connect with each other and with our peers around the country. So one of the highlights that I'll point out later is just this the fact that we're a part of a national network. So sometimes our educational workshops are hosted with chapters from the other 12 sites around the United States. So obviously virtual has been, it's been good for us in some ways. So just know that we host workshops to teach you the things that we feel like are going to be important both for your year of service, but also afterwards. and that, as we see sort of how this blended approach goes, we'll continue to share more details about what we're expecting to do next year. And then the last thing you see there is just structured reflection. So there is, data that says that part of learning from a service experience needs to be grounded in reflecting on the experience itself, on the interactions that we have with other people, on what we can learn from it, on how we can continue to improve from these experiences. And so we do this kind of structured reflection, both through monthly reports and then also just kind of through conversations that we have during our meetings with each other. So going back to this original kind of 4-picture image, I just wanted to highlight, because a lot of times the first things that are on people's mind is like, well, what do fellows do? What could I do? So this year, I'd like to highlight the fact that we frequently have projects in these in kind of like 4 domains. So improving mental well-being, increasing access to care, developing the potential of youth, and improving nutrition. So our top left picture is a nursing student from a few years ago who, based on kind of some service experiences she had with youth with spina bifida, realized that the parents, while there was some programming for the youth, the parents really needed a support system for themselves. And so she developed an online support group that did get together for this one event. And so anyway, that's just one of many projects we've had related to improving mental well-being. We've had other projects related to caregiver wellness too, but top right is 2 public health students who helped the Birmingham AIDS Outreach Organization start a mobile clinic for testing. And the goal, obviously, like most mobile clinics, is to get access to care to places in the state and city where people were less likely to go themselves and get tested. Through that project. I forget the exact number of people that they tested, but it always stands out to me that there were 3 individuals who did get identified as being HIV positive that they were able to link to care. So that's a great example too, as we talk later about just sort of the ways that we sort of try to define in a quantitative way what outcomes we're seeking and how our fellows are able to make, a real difference. Bottom right, David Osulu is a medical student who helped start a healthcare mentorship program in a local high school. And we've had other programs as well that are frequently done in either school or after school programs geared towards, various aspects of career preparation, test prep, things of that nature. And then bottom left were some Tuskegee students who did an after-school program helping kids learn through gardening, but specifically about nutrition and healthy eating, and giving them an opportunity really to be exposed to foods that they normally might not have ever tried. So these are kind of some common areas, not to say that everyone has to apply to do a project in one of these, but hopefully that just kind of gets some thoughts going about what you could also do. Let's see, Catherine, you want to, I think you already kind of mentioned that one thing that is available to you, again, as you think more about project ideas is, our website actually has a list of, and this is the specific link, but to all 80 plus fellows that have been in the program. So you can read there and see what they did and what they accomplished. And that's really kind of the best source, I would say. So with that, though, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine to tell you more about her experience, how she became a fellow, what that process was like, how she selected her project, and then what she was able to do. And I think what's neat in hearing from an alumni is she can tell you not only like about that year, but then how it's kind of transpired in the years since.
Yeah, of course. So when I first started looking for the fellowship, it happened when I was at orientation for the UAB School of Public Health. And I saw you, Kristen, actually give the mission statement of the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship, and I said, I definitely have to join. But I was just, hang on one second, I'm sorry. My dad just came home and he doesn't know I'm on a call. My apologies. Anyway, so I thought about this project from August until about October, and I actually noticed the timeline that you were talking about, Kristen, is kind of similar to my timeline when I was applying and looking for projects and things. It looks like they'll be applying at the end of January, I think. So I had this idea of physical activity and working with older adults, because that's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to work with elderly individuals. But I realized that it was challenging without any kind of history or background in like exercise training or exercise physiology to do physical activity with older adults in nursing homes. And then one day I was at art lessons and there was an older lady who was about 80 or 81, and she gave me all her paints. And she said she couldn't drive to art lessons anymore because because of her macular degeneration, she couldn't drive anymore. And I was like, well, what if I bring art to people who can't come to me? Like, these people also can use art. And I had already done research, and I was like, oh, it's like a bell went off in my head. I was like, oh my goodness, I could do art with them. I've done painting. I also paint, so I am an artist. But I was like, I can do painting, and that's still moving their body, that's still engaging their minds and going, and I can probably do it easier than physical activity. I won't have to worry about dangers and contraindications and things like that. So I just so happened to look up, because I didn't know how to go to a nursing home or approach one, but I went to a job fair at UAB one day, and this was actually in January, about 2 weeks before the deadline. And I'd almost given up hope of even doing a project. And East Glen, the nursing home I ended up working at, was there, and they were taking job applications. And I just asked them, lean back, sorry. Yes, I can. My apologies. And I asked them if they were taking volunteers, if they would be interested in somebody coming by and painting. And they were like, oh my goodness, yes. And from there on out, I went over there and I met with the program director and the people who do all the scheduling. And I was like, could I do art and come in here? And I explained to them about the Albert Schweitzer Fellowship, and they were completely on board. And so that kind of just transpired. So that interaction with that person at my art class is what inspired me to do art, because I was kind of blind to that idea at first, and then I came around. And then turned this application in, and Kristen was very helpful and like talking to me and helping me develop. And some of our application process was difficult in that you kind of really had to think through your project and like what you were going to do and in the place you were going to work at or work with, hopefully. And so I had all that picked out, did the interview, and I was like 15 minutes late for my interview because I misread the time. Also, anyway, it turned out to be just one of the greatest experiences, because you can see on the screen some of the results. And that's what I really like about this project, is it's also focused on helping you get results from your efforts and coming up with a results oriented framework without having to go through all the red tape of research and doing IRBs and things like that. Although even in this project, they can work with you on IRB approval, because I know there's been some people who did that. But this kind of helps you gather data, learn about health disparities, and see it in action, like working with this population of interest. So that's what I really loved, is just the human interaction outside of the clinic or within a clinic, but something you really won't get, I don't feel, in other college experiences. So that was what I really liked about that. And it led me, I'm sorry, I keep moving forward, but it led me into rehab science, because I realized that art and physical activity can be used to help people with depression, because I was focused on depression and socialization. And that's actually what my dissertation work is focused on now. So this project led me to the rehab science program, the PhD program in the Department of Physical Therapy. And I think if it wouldn't have been for getting into the fellowship and working with people at a nursing home and rehabilitation home, I wouldn't have been able to see the dots connecting, and I wouldn't have gotten into the PhD program I'm in now. So it really taught me about how depression is a disability, and it's the #1 cause of disability in the world. So it's something that I want to tackle head on. And there's many ways to tackle it, through art, physical activity, but mostly just addressing these social determinants of health, which you'll learn in depth, I feel like, in this program. and you'll get leadership, and then what's really great is all these different meetings, and you'll get to connect with your peers, and it's just a really fabulous experience all the way through. And I don't know what else was that. And then I kind of told you, so I'm a 4th-year PhD student in the rehab science program now. I have 1 more year left. I'm about to propose my dissertation, again, looking more at physical activity and depression, but in people with multiple sclerosis. But I still want to go, and as I progress through my career and become a professor and a lab manager, I want to also work with elderly adults again, developing ways to address and manage depression with lifestyle behaviors. And so that's kind of like how it all tied in. And I just knew that day when I saw Kristen at my orientation for public health, because I got my master's in public health, that I said, I have to do this. I have to be in this project. I have to do a project and be in this. But anyway, sorry for rambling, but that is what, culminated for me from this experience. And now I'm a fellow for life, and I serve on the board because I've been at UAB still, and I love to contribute. And I have a teaching project now as well, where I'm trying to connect graduate students with undergraduates and just mentor and talk to other graduate students about career opportunities and what this can do for you. And not only this, but so that's my teaching project on the side, a whole other side note, but it also led into what I wanted to do as a teacher, because I got a lot of teaching experience. So there's a lot of really valuable experiences from this that kind of round you out as a professional as well. So there's so much professional development that's really meaningful, I think. So anyway, that's my spiel.
Thank you. No, and that's, excuse me, I thought I was about to sneeze. That's a great tie-in, to what we think some of the benefits are. I think we're really looking for people who value what they can get from the experience, but particularly how they can learn from, their mentors, their peers, and I would say most especially the project participants. So the other things I think are just like an added bonus. So we do provide a $2,500 stipend, and that's meant to be compensation for those 200 hours of service that you are putting in. I do usually point out the fact that we award that stipend in 4 payments, so it's not as regular as a part-time job would be. So if you're working to put yourself through school, I'm happy to talk to people more kind of about the time frame that they can expect to receive those payments. But just because we don't want anyway, that to be a barrier to participation. But as Catherine kind of alluded to as well, this is a multidisciplinary program. And so when I say that you're going to get to learn from your ASF peers, I should specify that that's people from everything from like medicine, nursing, public health, dentistry, pharmacy, social work, health administration, counseling. It really just runs the gamut, and it changes a little bit year to year. But I would say what stays consistent is that there's a wide variety. And that's something that we pride ourselves on. And then I did allude to this earlier, but there are over 4,000 Schweitzer Fellows for life around the country. And I've had some of our own Alabama Fellows come back and say, they asked me about it in an interview, and it turned out that someone who was interviewing me for this job or for this residency, had been a fellow or had friends who were fellows when they were in medical school in, Boston or Chicago or whatever. So it's really neat to see how this can live on in lives beyond. So I'll just really quickly go through a couple of those FAQs, and then we can open it up for more questions. Essentially the main thing about, who qualifies is you need to be a graduate student, both when you apply and throughout the program. And since we're currently recruiting for students who will, be fellows March 2022 until April 2023, we just need to make sure that people are in grad school during that time frame. The other thing I frequently get asked a question about is where can the service project take place? I know, graduate programs are moving more and more online, so sometimes people aren't even residing in Alabama. That is kind of one stipulation we have, is we want to make sure that the projects, as a nonprofit in Alabama, we need to be impacting Alabama. However, I will say that, you know, if you have a connection to another location, we can certainly discuss, you know, whether or not it would be feasible to do your project in that other place. And then I always share the orientation date just because that is sort of a non-negotiable. We set that early so that people can plan around it. So just note that Saturday, April 30th through Sunday, May 1st will be that required orientation for our incoming class. The other dates we do set ahead of time. I'll share those with our class. And then once our fellows are chosen, I go back and I ask them, do you have conflicts? And we make adjustments if they do. So orientation is really the one time that we can't be as flexible, but beyond that, we will try to, you know, be more adaptable. All right, Catherine, will you answer this, I guess, from your perspective about time commitment and how do you, project ideas and how should people narrow them down?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes for me, when I have big ideas, is I like to create a mind map or something like that, you know, and you just write down your idea and then you start researching, okay, what are organizations that work with this? And then you also want to ask yourself about feasibility and can you come in here? Can you build on top of what they have going? Can you start something new? Which I was unsure of with the nursing home until I actually just looked up and they were there at that job fair that day. So they answered all my questions and I realized I could work with them very easily because they were taking volunteers. So depending on what you want to do, if you want to work in a clinic or like a lot of dentistry students do dental projects and things, or if you want to work in like schools with children, you just got to think about, is this a special population? Because if they're protected by the IRB, they're going to be harder for you to access in a way. So think about feasibility. And then just like I said, do a mind map, like a concept map of where you're going and what your interests are. And if you're a physician or you want to be like what population do you want to work with? You know, so population, idea, outcome. So.
And I can chime in too, just to say that, I mean, part of my job is to help you figure all these things out so you don't have to feel like you're alone. One thing that we're trying to do to help everyone this year is put together what we're calling tip sheets, but essentially to help you know, like, okay, well, I'm interested in this larger topic, like nutrition or food security. And then we will be able to show you like who have our fellows worked with in the past. So you can already kind of get a little bit of research done to read about those organizations. I'm also doing interviews right now with some of our community partners. And so I'm going to highlight a few project ideas that they share with us. So stay tuned. I'm hoping that within, you know, the next 2 weeks, so hopefully by mid to late October, we'll have those ready to distribute. So Catherine, this was the slide about time commitment that I was looking ahead and seeing. People always want to know, like, how do you balance this with the demands of graduate school? And some people even have work or other commitments on top of that. So what's your answer?
I didn't have to deal with clinicals. So it just depends on what your program is and where you are in that program. But there's this thing where we think we have time to do it and we just don't see that far ahead. And then there's being realistic about your time. So I was going to say, if you think you might be able in 6 months from now to work 6 hours a week at a clinic, let's throwing that number out there. I would have that. So you're probably only going to be able to work 3 hours at that clinic 6 months from now, depending on what your graduate program demands of you. So you really want to do, again, I'm all about feasibility here, because you want to do what works with your schedule, because the busier you become, you're going to prioritize getting that A and getting those passing grades and getting your clinicals, and the other stuff it'll fall to the wayside and you'll get stressed out, and you'll hit boulders too, because there's going to be things that crop up. So think about grad school and be in time management and putting these hours in on your calendar. How realistic is that going to be? And plan your time out for the entire year. And maybe that sounds like a lot, but if you really want to make a difference and join this project, but you're worried, you can discuss with Kristen about things like, oh, I'm anticipating being out for 2 months or whatever, because I have clinicals, I won't be available. And she can help you plan around that as well.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Catherine, that, this really is not only an individual decision based on individual people, but also based on kind of individual disciplines. So we've learned a couple of things over the years. One is that, we want to respect kind of the protected step study time that medical students have. And so I can say that a lot of times we try to sort of more front load for medical students. And likewise, if public health or counseling, there are others that are going to have maybe a full-time practicum or internship one semester. Those are the kinds of things that we encourage people to think about ahead of time. So just know that your time can be distributed according to what's best for you and your site. If people choose to do something kind of even over the course of the whole 12 to 13 months, what you're essentially looking at is 4 to 5 hours a week. And that's considering time both for planning and the actual kind of service itself. We do hold our meetings in the evenings or on weekends because we know that people are in class or have variable schedules during the days. And because some of our disciplines frequently have night classes, we try to rotate the nights of the week. So within a given semester, we may hold like one Monday evening, one Tuesday evening, one Wednesday, and one Thursday evening, just to, again, to kind of make it feasible. Oh, and then the last thing, which is certainly not least important, but I want to do a better job this year of highlighting just how helpful partner projects can be. So Catherine was not in a partner project, but we each year have, some assortment of partner projects, and those can be done one of two ways. So some partners say we're going to split the hours, which means they each do 100 direct service, but then they get to share the planning administration time. So that reduces it below the 200 that we typically talk about. Or some say, this project is really just so large, it's going to require more than my 200 hours. So we're going to come alongside each other and really spend like 400 hours on this project. So either way can be done, but just to say that if people are concerned about the time commitment, think about, do I know someone who would want to work with me on this? Because it's, possible that two people, in fact, all of my partners have always said something along the lines of, I can't imagine doing this alone. And so clearly we have a lot who do it alone, but I think it's just a testament to like how helpful it can be. I think to relieve like the mental anxiety and pressure too. So just another thing. And I, kind of said this when I was talking about our meeting schedule for next year, just that like, this is a little bit up in the air right now in terms of how COVID will affect our 2022 to 2023 cycle. I am hoping that, we'll have all of our schedule, the meeting dates that I can share with people, and we can make some decisions about in-person versus virtual, but most likely doing a blended approach. I am also saying that vaccination status is something that we're going to need to consider. So we are not requiring that fellows be vaccinated, but if someone cannot document that they're fully vaccinated, then we're going to want that to be a virtual project, or we're going to need them to do ongoing testing just so that we can, kind of in good faith tell our partners that we are keeping them and their clients safe and healthy. So that might be something for you to consider. And then, how has COVID affected us? So again, we have had the pleasure of co-hosting meetings with our North Carolina, with our New Hampshire, Vermont, and with New Orleans since COVID started. And so I am hopeful that we'll continue to have that. And it's just another great way to meet people around the country. So Catherine, I know you mentioned the time frame and how this was sort of a familiar thing to you. Anything else that you want to just point out about the sort of selection process or timeline?
The just apply by February 1st. No, not really. I mean, in between February 1st and February 8th, when are interviews held? Okay, so 22nd. So you have a month, think through your project if you get accepted for an interview, and just, be prepared when you go in there for like being asked kind of details about how you hope this will help you grow as a person and how you want to grow as a health professional, because some people I believe they get caught off guard a little bit, because I've also helped with interviews since I've had the interview, and then as a fellow for life and a board member, I've also done the interviews, and sometimes you get caught off guard by these kind of self-reflective questions you might be asked. So think about that, I guess.
Yeah, great point. So this year is a little bit different than when Catherine applied. You do not have to have all of those details figured out like she had to do in terms of like what was going to be, her outcomes of her project and what was her timeline for implementing it and all of that stuff. So you're right. The interview is, I think, much more sort of about what people are wanting to get out of it, what they think they could contribute back to the group. And, I think demonstrating sort of how they think they would be able to respond within a community setting. So we do want to see that people have put in some effort towards not only understanding the issue, but also knowing who in your community is addressing it. So we're asking you to identify one or more potential community partners, but you do not have to have a commitment from that organization. So I will work with fellows. So you see here where it says fellows begin March 1. Really, March and April will be a time for me to come alongside you and figure out, either based on shadowing through some stakeholder interviews, looking at more data to make sure that we're really honing in on something that's a priority for people. So that by the time you come to orientation, you've actually done a lot of the legwork and have a good sense of what you're going to do. And that's what's really kind of pointed out here too. So you will be doing these online kind of self-directed learning modules prior to orientation. So I'm trying to emphasize to people that 4 to 5 hours a week that you'll want to dedicate to ASF will really start in March. It'll just look a little bit different in March and April while you're still formulating your project plan. But by June, you'll sort of have like a written idea of what you want to accomplish. And usually by July is when fellows are ready to hit the ground running. So it's about July to March is when I would tell people that you're really going to be in like implementing mode. And then we don't want to leave off our big celebration at the end of the year, because we think it's really important that we celebrate the small wins along the way and then those big wins at the end of the year. And we're always so proud to recognize everyone at the end of their ASF year. Let's see. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and see what questions there are.
You guys actually answered pretty much all my questions. I was just worried about kind of the time commitment and what that looked like, especially going into second year. But I mean, all of y'all answered that very well. So that was really helpful. And then I know you said that we don't have to have like solidified ideas going into the application process, just like maybe 2 general ideas.
Yep.
But like after you get accepted, is it like you work with a mentor to like kind of hone in on the idea and then you partner up with the organization? Or do you have like someone kind of working through it, like through you or through it with you throughout the whole process?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And that's a great question about mentors. So ultimately we want to sort of surround you with, 3 mentors, if you want to think about it that way. I like to call myself sort of your ASF mentor. So I'll be there to guide you, particularly before you get these other 2 people on your team. But eventually we want you to have a faculty mentor, and that's someone who I usually say is more of the subject matter expert. So they might know something about the topic that you're addressing, or sometimes they have some community-based experience, but they're really going to be the ones to help you think about like, where can I look in the literature to make sure I understand, diabetes prevention for elderly or something like that. And then the third person is that site mentor. So who at your organization is really going to be your go-to to answer questions when you need help, or to give you feedback on your ideas. So each person kind of has a different role to play, and we provide some criteria. There's essentially like an agreement that they sign, so we can be more clear with them too when it gets to that point to say, hey, can you help, the student with these specific things? So all of that would kind of be in that March, April, May timeframe.
Okay.
And it's possible that like you already know, a faculty member that you think would be just a good guide. And so that's the other piece I would say is even if someone doesn't have subject matter expertise, I think just a good listener, someone who is very student centric can also be a great faculty mentor. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, that was the only other question that I had.
Well, I will point out that we have, last year, we had to do all of our sessions via Zoom as well. And so we recorded those, and you can find them on our YouTube channel if you just want to go and hear more kind of fellow perspectives. And we are going to also do 2, application clinics, if you want to call it that, or just open office hours. So stay tuned. We'll send out some reminders about that, but one's happening in November and one's happening in January. And again, that's just going to be me kind of meeting with people one-on-one to answer, kind of help you get your application the best it can be. And so again, if you want to kind of stay informed, we're going to send out a monthly newsletter, and that interest form that you see there will let us know that you want to receive those. We don't want to spam people if they don't want to get them. So we'll wait and hear from you if that's something you want. And then the last thing is social media. So we have a pretty vibrant presence on these platforms. And so it's just another place where you can sort of see what's happening and get stories about fellows, and I think just great ideas too. So, Catherine, any last words you want to share?
Sorry. Just think about this project and think about like a population and your time commitment. And I just know that this is probably going to be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life, and it'll really guide your career and your choices and just things. It makes you aware of a lot of things that you just aren't conscious of now. So it'll change your worldview too.